right? And then they had that, what Brian said, the table of showbread over here. And how many loaves were on that table? I can't hear you. I said, speak up now. Right, there was 12 of them. Right, there were 12. Why were there 12? How many tribes were there? Right, there were 12 tribes, 10 plus 2. There were 12 tribes. And every Sabbath, every tribe would bring one loaf in. Right? On the Sabbath day. And it would be a perpetual offering before the Lord. Now we know that was about 75 pounds of bread that were given to the priests. That was the priest's portion. Then, but that showbread was representative of communion with God. Right? We have a table today. It's called the Lord's Supper. We approach the Lord's table in communion. Right? They had a time of communion with God at the table of showbread. Right? So you had the golden candlestick, had a table of showbread, and then there was this next piece of furniture we're looking at. Man, this is so exciting! I can only stay in my skin. I better, because it would be kind of nasty if I came out of it. I'm so excited about this, because the next piece of furniture is this altar of incense. Okay, altar of incense. We're going to take a look at here. And first of all, our text in the Bible gives us the pattern of the altar. Look again at verse 1 in Exodus 30. The pattern. We don't have a handout today. This is the first time in a long time we didn't have handouts this morning, because I just thought I would go over this with you, and because some of this is a repeat of what we looked at, because it all is pointing to Christ, and that's okay. But I think it's just good to see these pieces of furniture here in the tabernacle. The pattern of the altar. Verse 1, and thou shalt make an altar to burn incense upon. Of shittim wood shalt thou make it. A cubit shall be the length thereof, and a cubit the breadth thereof. 4 square shall it be. 2 cubits shall be the height thereof. The horns thereof shall be of the same. Thou shalt overlay with pure gold the top thereof, and the sides thereof round about, and the horns thereof. And thou shalt make it into a crown of gold round about. And 2 gold rings shalt thou make to it under the crown of it by the 2 corners thereof. Upon the 2 sides of it shalt thou make it, and they shall be for places for the staves to bear it withal. And thou shalt make the staves of shittim wood and overlay them with gold. Here's more review here this morning. Why did God give Moses, or why did God have Moses make this altar out of that shittim wood? Or we know the other name for that is acacia wood. We've studied that before. Why did God say, Moses, you're going to make this out of acacia wood? What did that wood overlaid with gold represent? Well, and I know that some already have the answer to this. That wood, that acacia wood, that shittim wood, was found in the desert. It grew plentifully, actually. And it's an incorruptible wood. It's a very hard wood. Some say it's virtually indestructible. And God told Moses to use that wood because it represents the humanity of Jesus Christ. His humanity. He withstood the fires of crucifixion. He withstood all the scourging. He withstood everything that his creation could throw at him. He even withstood the grave, and he rose again from the grave. So that wood is representative of his humanity. And that wood was overlaid with pure gold, which represents what? His deity. Gold points to deity, doesn't it? His godness. His deity. So, humanity and deity combined. Jesus is all God, and Jesus is all man. Okay? That's why God does this with this material, this wood. And then there were horns on this altar. Okay? It was smaller than the brazen altar, by what we saw, the cubit size, 36 inches and things. But there were horns at the altar too. And remember what horns represent? Horns represent power. Okay? Horns represent power, and they pointed to the power and the commitment that Christ had to finish his Father's will. And then when they came in and put the blood, and they stained the horns of the altar with the blood, that was also, and remember the horns pointed up and out from the altar. And that represented salvation full and free for all. Pointed to the 4 corners of the earth. Out from there would be salvation. When the blood was applied to the horns of the altar, it was it portrayed, it was a display that for whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. God is into representations, portrayals here. Everything was pointing to Christ. Now, part of the priest's ministry included this altar of incense here. Remember, it was the priest's job, priest's function, his ministry to take care of these pieces of furniture because they all pointed to Messiah. The priest here would enter into the holy place. He would minister the golden candlestick. He would either trim it or light it up or add more oil to it there. And then he would prepare to offer this sweet incense on this altar. Look at verse 7 of Exodus 30. It says, "And Aaron shall burn thereon sweet incense every morning. When he lighteth the lamps, he shall burn incense upon it." When he talks about Aaron, he's talking about the priest, Aaron and his sons. Verse 8, "And when Aaron lighteth the lamps at even, he shall burn incense upon it, a perpetual incense before the Lord throughout your generations." So, try to get the picture here. In one of the priest's hands, in the hands of one of the priests, was a censer filled with sweet incense. And then a censer of burning coals. And then in his other hand, he had a pile of incense. Right? Where did he get those burning coals from in that censer that he had? He got it from the brazen altar outside. He took the coals from the atonement. He brought it into this other altar. He laid out the coals, and then he threw the incense. He sprinkled the incense over it, and then guess what happened? When you get that frankincense and stuff all together, it ignites. And it filled the room with all the smoke, with all this sweet smoke. And when it filled the tabernacle like that, there was a reason for that. So another question though. Understand, here's what's going on. The priest has already laid that incense down and the smoke is filling the room. Where was that altar placed again? We just read it here in verse 6. Where was that altar placed? It says, "And thou shalt put it before the veil that is by the ark of the testimony, before the mercy seat that is over the testimony, where I will meet with thee." Where did God tell Moses to put that altar? Let's say this is the veil, right? Priest is coming in. He's got the table of showbread over here, golden candlestick. He says, "I want you to place that altar of incense right here, right before the veil." Why is that? Well, the reason why is found in the question of what's the representation of that incense on the altar. Incense always represents the prayers of the saints. Well, here at least for sure. When he sprinkled that incense and it wafted up, the smoke came up like that, that represented prayer. God says, "I don't want it off to the side. I don't want it over here. I want it right before me, because when you come in to meet with me," because that's what it says in verse 6, right? He says, "Where I will meet with thee." It says, when you remove that veil and you come into me, the only way you come to meet me is through prayer. The only way you're going to meet God is through prayer, he says. The Old Testament priests could only approach God through prayer. In fact, they had to be right with God, but they can only approach him through prayer. And for the priest to meet with God, they had to go through that prayer. But that's true for us today as children of God as well, isn't it? For us to meet with God, we go through prayer, right? Again, everything that God has done with this tabernacle points to today in our Lord Jesus Christ. It's the same principle. But there is a significant difference. One significant difference here. What separated those Old Testament priests from God then? And we are believer priests today, and there's something that doesn't separate us. And what was that back then? I just moved it. What was that? The veil. There was a thick, heavy veil that separated the priest and God. Why don't we have that today? Why isn't there no veil of separation today? What's that? It was torn, right? Ripped. From what? From top to bottom. God tore from top to bottom because